Want to welcome to the program from the Washington Times, Emily Miller. Emily, good evening.
Hi, how are you doing, Cam?
I am excellent. Thanks for coming back on the program.
My pleasure.
All right. So the next step in your quest to exercise your constitutional rights in Washington, D.C. is now posted at the Washington Times. And it's fascinating. In order for you to, or anybody else actually, to become a gun owner in Washington, D.C., you've got to go through the gatekeeper. There's one guy that everybody has to deal with, right?
Yes, exactly. His name is Charles Sykes. And you don't know that just by going to the police department and the gun registry department in Washington and asking how you get your gun transferred. And it doesn't tell you in the 21-page booklet that they give you, a paper to tell you. No, you have to even go further to find that in all the directions, in the police and everything, there's one little Xerox of a card for one Charles Sykes. And the reason that's in there is because he's the only man in Washington who's licensed to bring in a firearm, a new gun. So if you can't buy, first of all, to be clear, you cannot buy a gun in D.C. There are no licensed gun dealers or gun stores, anything. You also can't buy one on the Internet and have it sent to D.C. And as you know, Cam, I've learned all this in the past week.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I picked up in my week trying to find a gun. So I can't go to a gun store, and I can't order it off the Internet. What I can do is I can buy it from a gun store, buy it from the Internet, pay for it, but I can't pick it up, and I can pay Charles Sykes $125 to go pick it up for me or to have it sent. And then I still don't get the gun that I paid for. I go through, well, we'll save that for the next part. But that's as far as I've gotten. So I found Charles Sykes, and what was amazing is that he now works in a government in the government building, the same building as the police department.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? And do you know why? Did he tell you why?
He did. He was actually pretty gruff. I'd gotten the card from I shouldn't say the card, a Xerox stuffed on a piece of paper from the registry department. At the D.C. Police Department, and I looked at the room number, and I went looking for it in this monstrous government building, and I ended up down in DMV parking adjudication, and that's where I found one Charles Sykes' office. That's where they stuck him. So outside his office, it says, there's always pasted up, he had put up signs that says, if anything has to do with parking tickets, go to this room number, getting away with people.
Okay.
So I rang the bell, and I waited, and no one came, so I just waited outside the door. Finally, this man comes along. He's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm looking for Charles Sykes. And he said, do you have an appointment? And I said, I don't. I just wanted a minute with him. He goes, well, I'm Charles Sykes. He's a scary guy. I mean, he's the one gun dealer in D.C. He's a scary guy. And I was like, well, could I just have a few minutes? I'm looking to buy a gun. I'm going to need your services. So he's like, well, you need an appointment. Come on in. He's gruff. Anyway, he warmed up, and he ended up being very sweet to me and very nice and helpful. And the reason he ended up there is in May, the building that he'd been in before was sold, and he lost his lease. So the lovely D.C. government decided they were going to make it completely impossible for him to find another office building so that he couldn't reopen the only gun dealer in D.C. So what they did is they classified him as basically as a gun seller, which he's not. But they found like one little word in the code where they could do that. And by doing that, he was not allowed to, his office was not, his business was not allowed to be within a football field's length of a school, a library, a church, an apartment building, or a house. So think about how many places that narrows it down to in the middle of Washington, D.C.
Right.
Right? I mean, I think even if you could be on the National Mall, would probably be the only place. So they basically made it impossible for him. And he said they also gave him a map where they said he could go, and it had no street names on it. He said it was like 5 inches by 7 inches, had no street names. So they did nothing. But what happened was, as you know, this appeals court case was coming down the pike from last week. And so D.C. government got a little scared because they were going to end up going to court over this, the fact that they shut off the one person who could get guns. So, and Mr. Sykes had gone to them and said, well, how about, since you guys are making this so difficult, how about I come in, get some space in the government building? That way at least, you have the control you want. And so that's when they came back to him and said, okay, we've got a deal for you. We will give you an office in the police department, and they ended up putting it in DMV, for $100 a month. So that's how he was able to reopen. Of course, he then had to spend a fortune on licenses and insurance to be in a government building.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a loss for him. But now he's reopened, so you can get your parking tickets and your gun in the same place.
And you know what's interesting about this, and I realize that this is, local D.C. we're talking about here, so competition is a bad word. But what happens when somebody says, you know what, I want to compete with Charles Sykes, and I'd actually like to go through the incredibly difficult process of opening up a gun store. Because the city has one person that they are allowing to do this. To me, that doesn't mean that they're complying with the law. I should have a choice if I live in D.C. where I go to become a gun owner. And frankly, again, if somebody wanted to open up a gun store in D.C., it sounds to me like they couldn't do it. It would be impossible.
Well, actually, Cam, I asked him the same thing. I asked Mr. Sykes the same thing. And he said, Emily, I'm the only one who wants to serve the citizens and do this. He's like, I'm not making any money. So what's happened, he's told me the numbers. In the past 3, almost 4 years since the Heller decision, Supreme Court decision, which overturned the gun ban in D.C., there's only been 1,500 guns registered in the city, and half of those were people owned. So it's about 250 guns a year are being bought new, which is amazing, as you know more than anyone, how many guns are skyrocketing sales around the country. But here, because it's so difficult to get it, and it's so no one knows how to,
right?
$250 a year. And so Sykes charges $125. I did the math. He's making about $30,000 a year. So as he says, I'm not making much. He's very funny. He's like, I was with him for about 45 minutes, and his door was open the whole time. And he's like, do you see a line out the door? I said, no. He goes, it's not like I'm giving out iPads and iPhones in here and they spend all night. He's like, that's why I only work 4 hours a day. He goes, because I work at night and make money. He's like, this is not a moneymaker. He goes, trust me, nobody else wants to get in it. There's just no money in it. And so then I brought up the same question, why don't you sell guns? You could make a lot more money. He's like, look at all the licenses I had to get to open this just dealing and transmitting them. His wall is filled with framed licenses. Because can you imagine what I'd have to get to sell guns here? Because plus the thing of the profit, 250 guns, maybe make $100 per gun. It's just not. I wouldn't be making any money after I paid for all these permits. So fact is, quite frankly, there's not a lot of demand because people don't know how to get guns legally here. They know how to get guns illegally.
Right.
Here in D.C.
Right. Well, that to me is that's a problem because it is still the District of Columbia inhibiting and maybe even prohibiting a culture of responsible gun ownership from actually taking root in Washington, D.C.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Cam. I mean, as I've said, I've been on this quest for all of a week, and I'm so buried in government and red tape and paperwork and trying to find which way to go next. I mean, there's just I can understand why so few people, and I think I probably know half of the 250 people.
Well, let me ask you a question, Lee. I mean, what would your reaction be if you had to go through this process every time you wanted to file a story for the Washington Times?
I'd quit and get a new job. And it's just not worth it. That's the thing is that's what D.C. is banking on. It's making it not worth it. And that's why I told you before when I was on this show, my goal is to go through all this, and then I'm going to put up on the Washington Times site a definitive guide to how to do it quickly and easily, not lose half your vacation time at work on this, but an easy way to do it because there's got to be. And if the city keeps putting up these roadblocks, then I think we've got other ways to fight back about this.
I was going to say, if you can find that easy way, please let the public know because, I mean, from what you're describing, with all of the multiple trips down to police headquarters that you're going to have to make, the trips out to Maryland or to Virginia to actually find your gun, I have
to take a quiz,
right?
A test. I have to take 4 hours of a classroom and 1 hour of shooting, which is not very much, but you can't do it in D.C., so I have to figure that out.
Well, again, imagine if you were told, Emily, that before you could file a story for the Washington Times, you had to take a creative writing course.
Right.
There had to be an essay, fingerprinting. There had to be an essay test. So we could make
4-hour class.
Right. Again, we're talking about a right. This isn't a privilege. This isn't something that the D.C. government grants you the ability to do. This is a right.
They don't see it that way. They see it as exactly the way you said it. They see it as something they are granting you after you work for weeks, take off a ton of vacation, take a ton of time of work, so that you can have a gun in your house. That's how they see it. And, I mean, they're doing everything they can to stop people from doing it. And part of it is this real belief. And I talked in my story today at the WashingtonTimes.com on the opinion page. I interviewed Kwame Brown recently, who's our city council chairman.
Right.
And he said, we don't need more guns. When asked directly, do you support the Second Amendment and people getting guns legally here in D.C., he says, I do not support having more guns in D.C. So, and then he talked to me, and then all his answers were about increasing employment because that would decrease crime rate. And I said to him, Mr. Brown, the thing that will decrease the crime in D.C. is a greater ownership of legal guns. And I just got a blank stare. I mean, it's the philosophy, this liberal philosophy here, that more guns will be more crime, which hasn't been proven true in the 4 years that we've now overturned the gun ban.
Mm-hmm.
But when the government officials do not support your Second Amendment, you've got a big problem.
You do, and I mean, and what you're describing here, I think, is something that we're seeing actually around the country. The court decision in Heller, the court decision in McDonald, didn't change any attitudes towards the Second Amendment in places like Washington, D.C. or Chicago or New York City or San Francisco or L.A. The anti-gun attitudes are still there. Now they're actually looking for a work around the Constitution.
Exactly.
Well, listen, Emily, I applaud you for your efforts. And
Thank you.
Once again, you've reminded me how glad I am that I live in Virginia.
I know. Well, maybe I'll bring my gun to Virginia one day when I get it.
Hey, thank you so much, Emily. We'll look forward to the next piece. When do you think so part 2 is up at the Washington Times website right now. When do you think we'll see the next installment?
Well, it's going to be horrible, but I have to go through the paperwork. I'm going to have to write about it because apparently there's a trick question in one of them. So,
really?
Yeah, I got to figure out what D.C. qualifies as a trick question on an eligibility paper. There's like 6 forms. So that's tomorrow or the next day. I'm going to work on that. So that should be up this week. Next week is finding a school to go to.
All right.
Gun school.
Well, good luck to you, Emily. We look forward to doing this again soon.
Me too. Take care.